Hi everyone, welcome to the visual guide to Abyssos, the 7th Circle Savage. This is the third newest Savage raid made available in Pandemonium by patch 6.2 and Final Fantasy XIV, Buried Memory. Following this guide will turn you into the 4th Horseman of the Apocalypse. I'll let that one simmer for a while. My name is Miztech and I'll be your raid guide. Once pulled, both tanks need to ensure they have first and second enmity at all times, as the boss will use enmity to target players with auto attacks and future tank busters. The first attack is Spark of Life. This is a heavy-hitting raid-wide attack that will also place a 12-second bleed on all players. Be sure to mitigate, shield, and heal through this damage as necessary. Next, the boss will cast either Condensed Aero 2 or Dispersed Aero 2. Condensed Aero will target the primary target for a heavy-hitting tank buster that must be shared by both tanks with cooldowns. Dispersed Aero will target the first and second enmity targets for heavy-hitting tank busters. Tanks will need to move away from one another, taking each hit with cooldowns. Either type of tank buster will also afflict each tank with a win damage over time debuff. Healers will need to watch tank health until the debuff resolves. The boss will then cast Blade of Attis, and 3 sets of directional circle clump markers will appear on the edges of the platform. At the same time, Immortal's Obol will form a proximity-based damage marker from the center of the platform. 3 smaller circles will also form at the northeast, northwest, and south edges, indicating that the bigger platform will soon turn into 3 smaller platforms. To handle this combo of mechanics, players can wait in the center until the Blade of Attis markers appear. They'll then move together to the northeast or northwest, whichever one has a wider gap between the Blade of Attis markers. Be sure to stand right on the edge of the platform to minimize damage. The original platform will be destroyed while players are thrown up into the air. They'll land on the newly formed smaller platforms and will need to stay on the edge of that platform until all of the Blade of Attis attacks have traveled across the arena. Players will be able to freely move around the time that the bridges form between the platforms. The boss will cast Forbidden Fruit, and seeds will appear on the left and right front platforms. One platform will have 2 seeds, while the other one only has 1. The 2-seed platform will spawn a yak and a bird, while the single-seed platform will spawn a bird. The yak will target its entire platform with a circle attack, while each bird will throw out a long line attack in the direction that they're facing. As these adds are spawning, the boss will cast Bough of Attis, reaching out to target the southern platform for a massive circle attack. At the same time, both healers will be targeted with these stack-up markers that will target them and anyone hit with massive damage and vulnerability up debuffs, meaning they cannot be stacked. The raid will have to split into light parties to share this damage. This combo of mechanics, tree attacks, and add spawns all resolve at the exact same time, forcing players into very specific safe spots based on the add spawns. As soon as the seeds appear, players must identify the platform with the single seed and move into it. The bird line attacks will always be in the direction of the bridges adjacent to the platform, so the 2 light parties will have to stack on either side of the converging bird line attacks, like so. To ensure proper positioning, players can use the bridges as guidance. The light party near the back of the platform will also need to be careful not to be too far back, or they might get clipped by the massive circle attack from the boss's hands. Once all of these attacks resolve, the adds will disappear and the boss will cast another Condensed or Dispersed Aero 2 tank buster. Move away or stack up as necessary. Don't forget your cooldowns. This is followed by another Spark of Life cast. Stack for heals and mitigate the damage. Next up, the boss will cast Inviolate Bonds. All players of each role group will be afflicted with an Inviolate Winds debuff marked 1 or 2, while one player from each role group will be marked with an additional Holy Bonds debuff marked 1 or 2. The 1 or 2 on each debuff acts as an extra indicator of which order the attacks will go off, so you don't have to look at specific timers. Inviolate Winds will target the player with a circle attack that cannot be overlapped with others. Holy Bonds will target the player with a circle attack that deals massive damage that must be shared. Once the first set of debuffs begin to count down, the boss will also cast another Bough of Attis, this time targeting the 2 platforms in the front for large circle attacks. This forces players to handle their first set of debuffs on the back platform. Players will first need to identify which role group has the winds or spread mechanic first. These players will spread on the platform in assigned positions to avoid overlap. The opposite role group will have to stack together in the center of the platform to share the damage on the Holy Bond 1 player. Once these attacks go off, players will need to look for the giant arrows indicating the boss's next knockback attack and run to the opposite platform to handle the second set of debuffs. The role group that originally spread will need to stack in the center this time, while the original stacked role group will need to spread to their assigned positions. Next, the boss will cast Roots of Attis, and a giant root will destroy the north bridge connecting the 2 front platforms. This is followed by another tank buster. Stack or spread and cooldown as necessary. The boss will cast Forbidden Fruit, and a seed will appear on each platform platform that will spawn a bird. Each bird will again shoot out long line attacks directly in front of them, forming specific safe areas on each platform. At the same time, the boss will cast a knockback from the center of the back platform and target all players with circle attack markers. Since the birds are limiting the available safe spots on each platform, we split into assigned light parties and have one group move to one of the front platforms while the other stays put. All players will use a knockback immunity to negate the knockback as they move into their assigned safe spots in between the bird line attacks to avoid overlapping attacks. Healers, be ready to top off your groups after these attacks resolve. Immediately after, the boss will cast Roots of Attis again, this time destroying the 2 remaining bridges. Each light party stays on their assigned platform during this time. The boss will cast Forbidden Fruit again, and a yak will spawn on each platform. Each healer will again be targeted with holy stack-up markers, and each light party will have to stack on them. As these markers appear, the adds on each platform will begin their platform-wide circle attack. Luckily, Lahabro will reform the bridges for you in a new configuration, and each light party will need to immediately step onto the bridge while staying stacked to share the incoming healer damage. Heal through the damage. The adds will disappear and players can return to the back platform at this time. The boss will cast Bough of Attis again, targeting the front 2 platforms. Identify which side of the knockback arrows are coming from and move to the platform opposite. Immediately after, tanks will have to handle another stack or spread tank buster. This is followed by another Forbidden Fruit cast. This time, one platform will spawn a yak, 2 platforms will spawn minotaurs, and an extra IO minotaur will appear on the bridge itself. The yak will target all players of the same rule group with these purple tethers. Players affected by these tethers will need to immediately run to the yak platform and fan out around the outer edge, away from the other platforms and bridge. These players will soon be targeted by long line attacks that cannot be overlapped, so give each other plenty of room. The players of the other role group will have to deal with the minotaurs. 2 players will be tethered to the minotaurs on the platforms with proximity tethers, while the other 2 players will not have any tethers on them. The players with the proximity tethers will need to run to the opposite minotaur platform to stretch their tether until it turns purple to avoid death. The 2 untethered players will have to move close to the minotaur on the bridge. This minotaur will target the 2 closest players to it with very wide frontal cleaves. These players will need to stand on the side of the minotaur opposite the platform with the yak on it, baiting towards the area between the 2 minotaur platforms. Once the baited cleave telegraphs appear, they can move away to avoid getting hit. All of these attacks resolve at the same time, and if all players spread appropriately while handling each mechanic, there will be no overlap and no deaths. Return to the center of the bridge for heals and to pre-position for the next mechanic. The boss will cast Blades of Attis again, and directional circle clumps will appear on each of the 3 platforms. At the same time, the boss will form another knockback marker from the center of the bridge, and the 2 healers will be targeted for stack up once again. Before these attacks go off, the platform will be restored to its original size. Players will need to split into their assigned light parties and stand slightly south to the right and left of the center marker to ensure they're getting knocked back together with their group. You'll have a quick second to adjust your group's position after the knockback before the shared damage goes off, so make sure you stick together. As the shared damage goes off, the Blades of Attis will begin to travel across the platform, and each group will duck in behind this attack to avoid the rest until they've disappeared. The boss will then cast another tank buster. Stack or spread, and don't forget your cooldowns. Next up, Forbidden Fruit will have 4 bird seeds appear randomly on the outer edge of the platform. At the same time, 4 soak towers will also randomly appear. The birds will tether onto players of the same rule group and eventually throw out a line attack in the direction of their tether target that will also knock back anyone hit. The soak towers must be handled by players not tethered to birds, with 1 player standing in each tower to avoid explosions, debuffs, and death. To ensure nobody overlaps bird knockback attacks, tethered players can run directly opposite their bird, pulling their tether all the way across the platform. These players will need to use a knockback immunity to avoid getting punted off. They'll also need to make sure they're not pulling their tether through any towers or onto any other bird players. These mechanics will all resolve at the same time. Afterwards, move back into the center for heals. The boss will cast another Spark of Life, so be sure to mitigate and help your healers out as much as possible. The boss will then cast Immortal's Obol again, and the 3 smaller platform circles will appear. The group will move together to the edge to minimize damage as the platform is again destroyed. Heal through the damage and get ready for the next Forbidden Fruit spawns. This time, the seeds will spawn 1 ad on each platform in a random orientation. There will be 1 yak and 2 birds. Immediately after, the boss will cast Inviolate Purgation, and all players will be afflicted by at least 2 Purgatory Winds numbered debuffs. 2 players from each role group will also have an extra Holy Purgation numbered debuff. This time, the debuff markers will go up to 4, indicating 4 rounds of debuff mechanics to handle. All players will have to deal with 2 spreads and 2 stacks in a random order based on their debuff numbers. The spread or stack mechanics will always be rule role group based, which adds a little bit of order to what seems like a chaotic mess of debuff mechanics. Furthermore, each debuff, when resolved, will leave behind an extra massive circle or donut attack that will go off after the original attack. As such, players will have to alternate which platform they're handling each round of debuff mechanics on. To easily handle this, players must first look at the ad spawns and immediately move into the front platform that does not have a yak. Once there, identify which role group is spreading first and which role group needs to stack. To minimize confusion, each spread and stack spot will have a static assignment on the platforms relative to the boss. As you can see here, we have 3 spread players directly north, south, and center, while the stack is always in the relative northeast or northwest, and the 4th spread player is always in the relative southeast or southwest. Spread spots can be further assigned to each player of each role group as well. The first set of debuffs will resolve as the animal spawn attacks go off. All players will then move to the platform on the other side to drop off the second set of debuffs. Again, identify which role group needs to spread and which group needs to stack. The first set of mechanics will explode in massive circles as the second set resolves. The boss is casting Light of Life at this time, so before moving back to the first platform to resolve set 3, make sure you stop for shields and heals and do what you can to mitigate the damage. Heal up before the third set. Finally, move back to the other side to handle the 4th and final set of mechanics. A second Light of Life blast will go off after the 4th set, so make sure you stack for shields and heals once you're back on the original platform. The next Forbidden Fruit cast will spawn a bird ad on one of the front platforms and the back platform. Immediately after, the boss will cast Roots of Attis, which will quickly destroy the bridge between the 3 platforms. Once the ads appear, all players will need to move to the outer edge of the empty platform. Once there, they'll need to identify which direction the 2 birds are facing. These bird attacks will cast over the eventual bridges, rendering them unsafe. Players will have to identify which area between platforms will not be targeted by a bird line and prepare to move in that direction. During this time, the boss will also cast Hemitheos' Glare, and all players will be targeted by these directional markers. This attack will drop large AoE circles underneath all players at the end of the cast that will chase players for a short time. The 3 bridges will reform at this time, and players must be ready to run through to the safe adjacent platform to avoid getting blasted by the AoE attacks chasing them. As soon as the AoE circles appear, run to the edge of the platform and wait for the bridge to form. As soon as it forms, run all the way through to the far edge of the platform to avoid getting hit by the chasing AoE. Next up, the boss will cast Famine's Harvest, and multiple seeds will appear over all 3 platforms. In this combo, one platform will have 2 seeds, while the other 2 each have 3 seeds. The platforms with 3 seeds will each spawn 2 minotaurs and 1 bird. The minotaurs on these platforms will tether to players of the same role group with proximity tethers. The platform with 2 seeds will spawn 2 minotaurs that will each target the 2 closest players with 2 massive frontal cleaves. The role group that is not tethered with proximity markers will need to run to this platform immediately to bait these cleaves. They all do so by standing in between the 2 minotaurs. As soon as the telegraphs appear, players will then move into the available safe spots to avoid getting hit. They'll also have 2 bird line attacks to dodge from across the platforms at the same time, so be careful. The role group with proximity tethers will each run to the platform opposite their minotaur. Once there, they'll each stand on one side of the bird spawn to avoid getting hit by its attack, and also ensuring that their minotaur attacks will not overlap. All of these attacks will resolve at the same time. Next, the boss will cast Death's Harvest. In this combo, 2 platforms will spawn a single bird and 1 platform will spawn a yak. Additionally, 2 of the 3 bridges will also have a yak spawn on them. The yak on the circle platform will render the entire platform unsafe, while the 2 birds face a specific direction to throw out their line attacks. The bird line attacks will always face in such a way that makes the bridge without a yak safe. The 2 yaks on the other 2 bridges will then tether to 4 players each one targeting all 4 players of each role group. To handle this, we first identify which platform will be unusable. All players will then identify which bridge yak they are tethered to. All but 2 of these players will move to the safe platform clockwise their bridge yak, skipping over the unsafe platform as necessary. Once there, they will spread their tethers apart out of the way of the bird line attacks. To ensure everyone has room, we assign 2 players, 1 from each role group, to take their tether on the safe bridge, 1 on each side of the bridge to ensure that they don't overlap. Alternatively, you could also assign both tanks to stack their tethers on the safe bridge with immunities. Either way works as long as 2 players are using the bridge, to allow for plenty of space for the rest of the group to spread out their tethers on the safe platforms. Again, all of these mechanics will resolve at the same time. Next, the boss will cast War's Harvest. This combo has a yak spawning on one platform and a bird on the other 2 platforms. 2 of the 3 bridges will also have a Minotaur. This time, the Yak will target all players of a role group with purple tethers. The Minotaurs will target 2 players of the other role group with proximity tethers, while the 2 birds will target the last 2 players with directional knockback tethers. To handle this combo, the 2 players tethered to the Minotaurs will stretch their proximity tethers by running to the platform opposite the Minotaur bridge. They'll pull their tether to one side of the platform to minimize potential overlap. The 2 players tethered to the birds have the easy job here, as they will simply pull their bird to face the outside of their platform and use a knockback immunity to avoid getting blasted off. The 4 players tethered to the Yak will split in 2, with 2 players spreading their tethers behind the Yak, while 2 players run to the adjacent platform and spread to either side of the player with the bird tether. This should allow everyone plenty of room to handle their mechanics without fear of overlapping. Once again, all of these attacks resolve at the exact same time. At this point, the boss will cast Spark of Life, and healers should top everyone off as quickly as possible. Be sure to mitigate this damage as much as you can. The boss will then cast Hemitheos' Holy 3 and target each healer with stack up damage. This is immediately followed by another Bough of Attis cast, targeting the front 2 platforms. All players will need to move to the back platform and split into their assigned groups to share the incoming damage with their healers. Identify which hand the knockback is coming from and move to the opposite platform. There will be 2 more Spark of Life casts before the boss casts his final Light of Life hard Enrage. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know. Up next, we'll head into the first part of the 8th Circle Savage. As always, thanks for watching. Till next time.